When Shane van Gisbergen arrived at Sonoma Raceway on the weekend of June 27 to 28, 2026, he was carrying the weight of a brutal previous week. He was still processing the frustration of being eliminated in a multi-car wreck just 32 laps into the Cup Series race at Naval Base Coronado the Sunday before, a result he described as one that left him certainly pissed at the start of the week. That crash had cost him critical points in the standings battle, dropping him dangerously close to the chase cut line with just a handful of regular season races remaining. Sonoma was not simply an opportunity, it was a necessity. And what unfolded over those 2 days in California wine country would rewrite the record books twice in a span of 24 hours, and deliver one of the most striking confessions in recent NASCAR memory. Saturday at Sonoma began the destruction. Van Gisbergen put on another road racing clinic in the pit boss of Foodmax 250, crossing the finish line ahead of Connor Zilisch by a margin of 1.324 seconds to score the win in the 79-lap event on the 1.99-mile road course. The dominance was total and systematic. But buried inside that Saturday victory was something that mattered far beyond a trophy. Van Gisbergen clinched his 6th career win in NASCAR's second division at Sonoma, surpassing Marcos Ambrose, who had won 5 times between 2008 and 2014 across 77 starts. Van Gisbergen had already beaten that benchmark in just 39 starts. Consider what that efficiency gap actually means. Ambrose, a 2-time Australian Supercars champion who had carved out a reputation as one of the sharpest road course specialists NASCAR had ever seen in its lower divisions, required 77 opportunities to set a benchmark that stood for over a decade. The man from New Zealand needed fewer than half that number of attempts to surpass him outright. Van Gisbergen said after Saturday's victory, "Pretty amazing day. Right from the start I could feel that the changes of the car were better and was able to manage the gap at the start. We flipped both stages trying to keep the track position. The record was broken efficiently, cleanly, and with the kind of controlled precision that has become his trademark at every road course on the NASCAR calendar." Then came Saturday evening's admission that should have reassured absolutely nobody. Van Gisbergen walked out of the Sonoma garage and openly described his number 97 Trackhouse Racing Chevrolet Cup car as subpar. For most drivers, that kind of pre-race assessment before a 110-lap grind around one of the most technically demanding road courses in North America would represent a genuine warning signal. For SVG, it served only as additional context for what Sunday produced. The previous year at this same venue, Van Gisbergen had led 97 of 110 laps from pole position and turned the Toyota Save Mark 350 into a coronation lap. The idea that a subpar version of his Trackhouse Chevrolet still represented one of the fastest cars in the Cup field was not optimism, it was historical precedent backed by concrete data. Sunday's race opened with Ty Gibbs seizing control from his pole position, and the Joe Gibbs Racing driver made it clear from the opening lap that he was not simply a passenger. Gibbs swept the opening 2 stages from pole and led 31 laps before ultimately finishing third. Through the first stage, Van Gisbergen was already executing the strategy his team had designed to maximize their championship points return. Van Gisbergen made headway early, working his way through the field and getting to the rear bumper of Michael McDowell by lap 13, slipping to the inside across the start-finish line to begin lap 14. Instead of taking second-place stage points, Van Gisbergen pitted at the end of stage 1 with 3 laps to go. Gibbs won the stage ahead of Christopher Bell, McDowell, Hosvar, Ryan Preece, and Alex Bowman. Van Gisbergen was 7th as the first of those drivers to pit before the stage's end. The stage flip strategy was deliberate, sacrificing maximum stage points to gain track position for the long run ahead. Van Gisbergen cycled to the lead of the race under caution ahead of Kyle Larson, Chase Briscoe, and Denny Hamlin. On the lap 30 restart, Van Gisbergen cleared Larson and began to build a margin. Larson couldn't keep pace and began losing positions while Chase Briscoe, Ryan Blaney, and Connor Zilisch surged forward. Again, with 3 laps to go in stage 2, Van Gisbergen surrendered maximum stage points and elected to pit with a 10-second gap back to Blaney. Gibbs inherited the lead and the stage 2 win ahead of Christopher Bell and AJ Allmendinger. Again, Van Gisbergen was 7th. The pattern was intentional and methodical. He was building toward the third stage rather than burning track position for points he didn't need in the moment. Van Gisbergen and Zilisch lined up first and second for the start of stage 3 on lap 60 once pit stops were completed. On lap 61, Austin Cindric in the number 2 Team Penske Mustang collided with Josh Berry and spun the number 21 Wood Brothers Racing Mustang. Debris from the clash brought out the only incident-induced caution of the day. Van Gisbergen led the lap 64 restart. From that point forward, the race belonged to him, at least on paper. The reality of what was unfolding inside the number 97 Chevrolet over the final 27 laps was considerably more uncomfortable. The handling of the winning car deteriorated noticeably over that final stage, with Van Gisbergen managing a machine that was increasingly difficult to drive at the limit. He was not simply cruising to a clean victory. He was wrestling a car that was working against him while an exceptionally fast Chase Briscoe closed the gap with every passing lap. For the second straight year at Sonoma, Van Gisbergen had to hold off a charging Chase Briscoe over the final laps to win at the 1.99-mile, 11-turn road course. Briscoe closed within 1 foot of SVG's bumper in the hairpin at turn 11 on the final circuit but couldn't get close enough to the New Zealander's number 97 Trackhouse Racing Chevrolet to make a move for the win. The margin at the line told only part of the story. The final victory margin was only 0.357 seconds over Chase Briscoe, the closest at the Sonoma venue since 1999. It was a finish that had the entire paddock holding its breath, and it was Van Gisbergen's response afterward that delivered the headline his team had perhaps not anticipated. On the battle for the win, Van Gisbergen said, "We had these shitboxes come out in front and they were wobbling all over the track and putting dust and I just kept struggling. Chase was just really, really good. Yeah, a couple more laps we would have had some problems." That was the truth left everyone speechless, not a triumphant declaration, but an honest admission from a race winner that the margin was paper thin, the car was compromised, and Chase Briscoe had given him everything he could handle. Van Gisbergen also said, "What a day. We were really bad yesterday, and these guys did an amazing job turning this car into a winner. The 19 was coming. He was really, really good, and I ran out at the end." The victory carried historic weight that extended well beyond the Sonoma podium. Van Gisbergen led 3 times for 74 of the 110 laps in securing his 8th Cup Series victory in his 68th start, tying NASCAR Hall of Famer Tony Stewart for second most all-time road course wins, one behind Jeff Gordon's 9. Stewart's 8 road course wins represented a career built across an era when road racing in NASCAR was considered a specialist's territory for the few. Van Gisbergen has reached that same number in a fraction of the time, and now sits just a single road course victory away from being the sole challenger to Gordon's record. The victory further cemented Van Gisbergen's status as NASCAR's premier road course racer and moved him within 1 road course win of tying Jeff Gordon for the most in Cup Series history. Jeff Gordon's 9 is now the only barrier left standing between Van Gisbergen and outright ownership of the most storied road course record in NASCAR history. While Van Gisbergen stood in victory lane, one of the most consequential subplots of the entire 2026 NASCAR season was unfolding at the back of the field. Tyler Reddick suffered a power steering failure early in the race. The mechanical problem forced Reddick multiple laps behind the field before he ultimately finished 36th, last place. Reddick had entered Sonoma as the points leader, the dominant force of the 2026 regular season, a driver who had won 5 of the first 9 Cup races this year. None of that history mattered once the power steering gave out on the number 45 car. Denny Hamlin finished 26th after a late race spin, but it was enough to move into the NASCAR Cup Series regular season points lead after Reddick's mechanical failure. For the first time all season, the points standings had a new leader, and Hamlin inherited it without winning the race. In a race of divergent strategies, Van Gisbergen banked a race-high 63 points after finishing 7th in both stages. Ty Gibbs won both stages before finishing 3rd, taking away 54 points from the weekend. The swing in the standings was seismic, and the championship picture heading to Chicagoland looks nothing like what it did when the Sonoma weekend began. Sunday at Sonoma also marked the opening round of the 2026 NASCAR In-Season Challenge, the tournament-style bracket competition that began at Pocono with 32 drivers seeded by their points position. The top seed heading into the bracket was Tyler Reddick, with Alex Bowman earning the final 32nd seed. The tournament will make stops at Chicagoland Speedway, Echo Park Speedway, North Wilkesboro Speedway, and culminate at a championship round hosted at Indianapolis Motor Speedway on July 26. Round 1 at Sonoma produced results that defied the seedings in several matchups. The biggest upset belonged to 32nd seeded Alex Bowman, who outfinished top-seeded Tyler Reddick, an outcome made entirely possible by Reddick's power steering catastrophe. Todd Gilliland and Michael McDowell were also among the lower seeds advancing out of Sonoma, with both drivers delivering strong enough finishes to claim their spots in the Round 2 bracket at Chicagoland. 16 drivers will advance after Sonoma, 8 after Chicagoland, 4 after Atlanta, and 2 after North Wilkesboro, before those finalists race for $1 million at Indianapolis. The bracket picture heading into Chicagoland next weekend is significantly more open than anyone projected before Sonoma, with former top seed Reddick now eliminated from the in-season challenge entirely. On the SVG versus Ryan Preece matchup, seeded 14th versus 19th respectively, Van Gisbergen's dominance at Sonoma made the result straightforward. Heading into the in-season challenge, SVG was described as a near-certain Round 1 advancer at Sonoma, a track where he had led 97 of 110 laps in the previous year's race. Ryan Preece finished 8th on Sunday, a solid result, but one that could not match Van Gisbergen's winning performance. SVG advances to Chicagoland, where the oval surface will present an entirely different challenge, though his oval results have shown marked improvement across the 2026 season. Away from the headline battles, 3 supporting storylines define the depth of what Sonoma produced. Christopher Bell confirmed Saturday that he planned to run the full race at Sonoma despite his fractured wrist, ultimately starting 14th and delivering a 5th-place finish for Joe Gibbs Racing. Bell had suffered the wrist fracture in a hard crash with Chase Elliott at Michigan International Speedway on June 7, and had since dealt with a chain of misfortune that included running out of fuel at Pocono and an engine failure at Naval Base Coronado. Due to the physical demands of the 19-turn, 3.4-mile Coronado street course, Bell had removed himself from that race under the first caution flag period, with Joe Gibbs Racing O'Reilly Auto Parts Series driver Brent Cruz filling in behind the wheel of the number 20 car. At Sonoma, Bell made no such concession. He strapped in, ran every lap, and produced a top 5 result while managing a fractured wrist on one of the most physically demanding road courses in North America. Bell entered the Sonoma weekend carrying a plus 60-point cushion above the Chase cut line, and his gutting out a 5th-place finish was precisely the kind of damage control performance that keeps a playoff position intact when the standings are this compressed. Connor Zilisch delivered the second major supporting story of the Sonoma weekend. The Trackhouse Racing rookie had endured a miserable 2026 season by any objective measure, but at Sonoma his raw pace was undeniable. Connor Zilisch earned the first top 10 of his Cup career, placing 7th on Sunday. That result, on a road course where his natural ability had always been evident, represented a tangible milestone for a driver who had struggled to translate his talent into consistent results at the Cup level. In Saturday's O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race, Zilisch had finished second behind Van Gisbergen, and on Sunday he demonstrated that his pace was genuine, not circumstantial. The combination of his road course speed and a clean race gave the number 88 program a result worth building on as the regular season enters its final stretch. The third supporting story belonged to Bubba Wallace, and it was not a positive one. Bubba Wallace was one of the first drivers out on track for Group B qualifying on Saturday, and after dipping a wheel at the exit of Turn 10, he lost control and slammed nose-first into the barriers, destroying his primary car and forcing the number 23 team to roll out a backup machine for Sunday's race. That decision to start from a backup car at a road course as technically demanding as Sonoma carries an inherent penalty in terms of setup and balance. Wallace showcased control issues throughout Sunday afternoon. He got loose early in Stage 2 when he was running in 10th place, having to go off track and stop to avoid a pass-through penalty. Minutes later, the number 23 got loose again and made contact with Todd Gilliland, who delivered payback in the next corner, sending Wallace into the dirt and dropping him even further back in the pack. Wallace failed to record any stage points and fell closer to the Chase cut line as a result. For a 23-11 racing team already navigating a difficult season internally, Sunday at Sonoma was a weekend to forget across both of its Cup entries. With Sonoma now in the books, the NASCAR Cup Series playoff picture has been dramatically reshaped. Van Gisbergen's 63-point day now gives him a 36-point cushion heading to Chicagoland, a track where oval racing will demand a different set of skills. Before Sonoma, he was sitting 5 points outside the Chase cut line following the Naval Base Coronado disaster. One weekend and one dominant performance later, he has converted a points deficit into a meaningful buffer. All told, Van Gisbergen has led 8 points-paying races this season for a total of 184 circuits at the front of the field, while also spending time out front at the non-points clash and all-star races. Those numbers speak to a driver who is not simply capitalizing on road courses, he is genuinely accumulating laps led at a rate that rivals the best in the series. For the drivers still outside the Chase cut line heading into Chicagoland, the pressure is compounding with every passing weekend. Drivers including Joey Logano at -10, Brad Keselowski at -13, AJ Allmendinger at -21, and Michael McDowell at -34 entered Sonoma in the danger zone, and with the final road course of the 2026 regular season now gone, the remaining schedule is predominantly oval racing, a format where specialized road course gains are no longer available. The bubble drivers who could not extract meaningful points from Sonoma now face a straightforward and unforgiving reality. The ovals ahead will determine whether they make the chase or watch it from the outside. Chicagoland, Atlanta, North Wilkesboro, Indianapolis, Iowa, Richmond, New Hampshire, and Daytona make up the remaining regular season schedule, and none of those venues will offer the kind of margin-building opportunity that Sonoma represented. The victory was Van Gisbergen's second of the 2026 season, his second straight at Sonoma, and arrived 1 week after the Naval Base Coronado crash. As he said himself, "I was back to normal by the weekend, but, yeah, I was certainly pissed at the start of the week. This really makes up for it, sharing it with these guys. They went through it at the start of the week. Pretty special to win." That quote captures precisely what the Sonoma weekend meant in context, not just a record-breaking performance, but a response to adversity delivered at the highest level. A driver who had nearly seen his chase hopes extinguished 7 days earlier walked out of California wine country with the points lead among the bubble drivers, a historic record to his name, and Tony Stewart's place on the all-time road course list now occupied by a New Zealander in only his 68th Cup start. The only record left to chase is the one that belongs to Jeff Gordon. 9 road course wins across a Hall of Fame career, built across seasons at Sonoma and Watkins Glen when Gordon was the undisputed master of every road course NASCAR visited. Van Gisbergen now sits just 1 victory shy of matching Jeff Gordon for the most NASCAR Cup Series road course wins in history. Given the trajectory, given the efficiency with which he has accumulated these 8 wins, and given that the 2026 NASCAR schedule still contains road courses in the coming seasons, the question is no longer whether Van Gisbergen will break Gordon's record. The question is simply when. One more road course win. That is all that stands between Shane Van Gisbergen and sole ownership of the most prestigious road racing record in the history of NASCAR's Premier Series. If you want to stay on top of every development in the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series, every record broken, every standings shakeup, every turn-by-turn battle that shapes the chase picture, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the like button on this video. We cover every major story as it happens, so you never miss a moment of what is shaping up to be one of the most competitive and dramatic NASCAR seasons in recent memory. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you are always first to know.